in the 90s of like sub pop culture, like after Nirvana, but still in that era. I used to help book shows at a venue there called the Velvet Elvis, and I did a few other things there. Like, we did house shows. I lived in a house where we would put shows on in our basement, so I was kind of always involved in the industry a little, just getting to know people that way, doing small stuff like DIY shows. And then I moved to New York City in the late 90s, and still really involved in music stuff there. I had some friends who had a band that you all might know, or maybe some of you might know, called the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. And they were just starting out in New York City, and the guitar player and I were really good friends. We used to DJ in New York. We used to DJ vinyl records together. And when they got more famous, they asked me to come out on tour with them because they just wanted a woman there. The singer Karen O wanted a female, and I think they just knew that I had been around doing music stuff for a long time. So they were like, we would love to have you come and just help do whatever you can. So I ended up going out on tour with them for 2 weeks in Europe, just kind of like helping the tour manager, assisting him, and getting Karen to getting her like her press, helping organize like day-to-day stuff with him, and then eventually like doing accounting, and eventually doing a little bit more, and then that turned into like a whole job that lasted like 3 years. I ended up moving back to America. I was living in Paris at the time, and it turned into just like a career that after that 3-year tour with them, because they grew so much in those 3 years, that it turned into another job. Like another band asked me to come out with them, and then eventually I ended up tour managing that band. They were called The Faint from Omaha, Nebraska, and that's like spiraled into like my whole career. Which from then on out, it was like other bands asking me to come out, and that's kind of how I got started.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I guess botany would not have put that in the
Oh,
category.
really?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still interested in botany. I
Yeah, of
definitely was
course.
not planning on this career at all.
Yeah.
I'm happy that I ended up here, but I think also just like my love of music and growing up in Seattle in late 90s, like Modest, I was friends with like Modest Mouse. I grew up with that band. So for me, it was just like, it turned out the right way. It was kind of meant
Hmm.
to be, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so yeah, it's interesting, like with everyone we've talked to, it just sounds like everyone has their one little lucky thing that like turns into something bigger, which is so interesting to learn about.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so like before you started, like before you went on tour that first time, were there any other like job experiences you had that like you think have like served you in the long run, even if they weren't music related? Like what skills do you think you gained from any previous roles?
Uh, Honestly, I think that this is going to sound crazy, but I'm sure some of you students understand because you're probably not just going to college, but also working. But I worked when I moved to New York City. I worked as a waitress in like crazy busy restaurants,
Mhm.
like brunch shifts where I would get up at like 7 in the morning and be there until like 4:30 or 5 p.m. And I think that the like working in a restaurant and being a server is like one of the craziest jobs you can have because you
Mhm.
have to be doing so many things at once. You have to really be on top of it. You have to be on your feet all day. You have to deal with like high stress situations. You have to deal with like grumpy people, a lot of emotions. Also, your staff, whether it's like the staff or the chefs or the customers. And that actually, in the later in life, like later in my career, I realized how beneficial being a waitress in like really busy, like high end restaurants was to me as a tour manager. Just like being able to give me organizational skills and dealing with people skills, and just like the high stress situation of like, you got to get that food to that table. You can't mess up that order. And I think touring in a lot of ways could be a metaphor for that. It's definitely that kind of situation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like working in a
Um,
restaurant
yeah,
is literally the most stressful like job I've had in my working life so far, and it's just, but yeah, I definitely
yeah,
agree that it like gives you, it's just, it is for like a really emotional and crazy setting to be in. So yeah, for sure. Um, and then
yeah. And
what,
the skills of just being able to be organized.
mhm, yeah, for sure. Before coronavirus, what did your job kind of look like? And I know like no day is the same, but like a typical week or a typical month of the year, like what kind of did that look like for you?
Before coronavirus, wow. Okay, so my last job before the lockdown, because I live in Los Angeles, I was in Houston, Texas at the rodeo with Lizzo, and we were doing rehearsals there. So we flew everybody out from LA and New York, and we had a hotel, and it was just in the very beginning of Corona time, right before they actually really called it, if they ever did, I don't know, in America. And we're at the rodeo, we're doing rehearsals for a week before the show, and we were all kind of just like straight back to our hotel. I think people were starting to get a little worried, and then it got canceled like 2 days before the rodeo, so that was the end of that. So it was pretty weird experience to be at the rodeo, like of all places, like the most people in one place, just like breathing
Mm-hmm.
on each other. But before that, I was out with Rex Orange County, who's a British guy. He's a singer-songwriter from London, and I think my job, because I work from home a lot of the time when I'm not on the road, it really looks like a never-ending job. It's a crazy job to have. I mean, I think being a tour manager, especially, you're dealing with like so many things in advance of shows. So if we're booking a tour that starts in January, my job starts in August. So
Mm-hmm.
once the contracts are done and everything's set in place, then it's all kind of handed over to me, and then I take it and run with it. So there's just so many moving parts to a tour, I think, to make it happen. And I'm dealing with so many people on a daily basis from home. So when I'm not out on the road, I'm in my house working or coffee shop on my computer just like for hours and hours a day till my fingertips get numb from
Mm-hmm.
typing.
Yeah. And then what kind of like what is it like to be on the road? I know that it's probably an amazing experience. So like but obviously an incredibly stressful one as well. So kind of what does that look like for you?
It is an amazing experience. I would never take back the job experience that I've had in a million years. I think um, being able to like travel the world and experience like the sensation of a show, it's
Mm-hmm.
extremely high stress, but it's also like every time I feel like extra stressed out on the road and I feel like, what am I doing? How am I surviving? How am I alive? Days on end, just sort of like mountains of things piling up. I think when I'm out there, like when the show goes up and the day is like coming to an end, and the band get on stage and you see the reaction of the people, um, and how emotional it is for everyone and how much like music changes people's lives. I think that really makes me realize like what I'm doing out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um Amazing. I miss live music so much. I'm sure as you do, of course, and probably
Yeah,
many
me
people
too.
on this call. But yeah. And I guess another question, how did you like grow in the confidence to be able to be like one of the people that's in charge of like such a big operation, like especially like being a woman, it's very difficult to like sometimes get over that like imposter syndrome and like work through some of that just from personal experience. So how
Sure,
did you
yeah.
kind of work through that and like grow in the confidence to like be like, yeah, I do know what I'm doing, like.
I think because I kind of grew into like a music scene when I was younger, like I was saying before. I think that once I got out on the road, I was with friends. The IES
Mm-hmm.
were like friends of mine, and the tour manager at the time was an old friend of ours too. So I was kind of automatically with people who believed in me and who trusted me as a human, I think. And so they gave me a lot of like confidence to like grow, I think, in my job for sure. I feel really lucky about having that experience. And then when I moved to the next band and became a tour manager, I was with another friend of mine was tour managing at the time, and I was kind of assisting him. And he really believed in me, and I think the band really believed in me too. And when I got offered the job to be the tour manager, I was not expecting it because I'd only been on the road for a few years. It definitely wasn't. I felt like I don't really know what I'm doing, but of course I did. And I think in the moments where I felt unsure, my friend Gabe Gonzalez, who's still a tour manager. He works for Bright Eyes and a few other bands. He was just like, "You got this. Like this, you've got this. Like there's no doubt in any of our minds that you're the one to do this, and you're going to be good at this job." And you know what? It just gave me just enough hope in my and belief in myself that I was just like, "Okay, I got this." And I think one of the things about being a manager that a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of the things that you like skills that you need to be out there on the road, they really come from being out there on the road and experiencing it. And I think a lot of people ask me when I'm out there how I got into it, how that they want to get into it, that they're really interested in being a tour manager or production manager, because I also do production. And how did I start and stuff. And honestly, my is just like being in you, it's like working the box office or selling merch for bands, or I think meeting people and being like open to just talking to people, introducing yourself to people, like, you know, letting them know that you're interested in that job. I think just kind of being a little extroverted and being able to kind of tell people like, hey, I'm confident enough in myself to do this. It really helps a lot. And I think that's like advice that I give, because I do think that getting into the industry is not necessarily easy. And I think it's your confidence levels in yourself. I think being a good person. I also think, yeah, like I said before, like being organized and being able to deal with like really high stress situations and handle them with like patience instead of like freaking out. I think when people get really overstressed, that can just make everything crumble. And nobody likes that. And being a woman, it's very interesting in this industry. I mean, I think I've been doing it for a long time, and when I started, there was very few female tour managers in the industry. I think I've definitely met a lot of women on the road who do lights or like other jobs. And I think there's definitely a thing with being female in like a male dominated industry that a lot of women feel like they need to prove something in order to show that they're better or that they're good at their job. And I think it angers them and then ends up making them resentful, because there is a lot of misogyny in the industry. There's definitely a lot of people, a lot of men who do not want to see women succeed, or who want to just make sure that oh shit, it just died. Oh, okay.
No, it's good.
Anyway, there's like a lot of men who want to see women kind of fail. I think they feel intimidated by a female taking their job, which is ridiculous, as we know. But it's been interesting as a woman, and I think a lot of times I use this is a really good example of being a woman in the industry. I was with a band from New York City called Fisher Spooner, and we had a show in Colombia, and it was in the country Colombia, and it was a really big festival, and it was like one of the first festivals that Colombia did after the country opened up to the public and started doing like public events with the city, with Bogota. And they had a festival in the park, huge. It was called Rock el Parque, and there was tons of bands, and it was free, so anyone in the country could come for free and see the show. So there was about, you know, I think there was like the capacity was like 100,000 people or something. And we got there, and of course, like a big part of my job is like in advance, like I was saying before. So it's like emailing people, lots of phone calls, organizing like the rental of the gear, and like making sure that like everything that we have is going to fit on the stage, and or like that it's going to be there and they're going to rent it to our like standards, like whether it's gear or lighting or backdrops or video walls or whatever it is. So that's a big part of my job. And because my name is sort of strange, I think that they weren't sure if I was a man or a woman. I think they assumed that I was a man. So when we got to the show, also Colombia is like famous for being a little bit unorganized. I think South America and Mexico, because it's not as common, it's newer there for them to be doing big shows like that. So they're sort of infamous for being a little bit complicated. To say it nicely. They've gotten a lot better, but it's definitely a new thing for them. So yeah, we got to the venue, and I went to go introduce myself to everybody, to the local crew, and to all the people that I'd been emailing with. And they all kind of looked at me like, this is like, where's the tour manager? And I was like, and they're like, sorry, who are you? And I was like, oh, I'm the tour manager. And they were like, oh, we thought you were a man. And I was just like, oh, is that a problem? Is there a problem? Is there a problem that I'm a woman? And they were like, no, it's we just were confused. But it was funny because when they were emailing with me, there was like a camaraderie and a respect. And I definitely know what I'm doing. And at that point, I've been doing it for over 10 years. So I definitely knew what I was doing. And we did the advance went really well, and I think the conversations were really open and really good. But once they saw that I was a female, the energy really changed a lot. And I think they were just like, they didn't take me seriously. I think they just couldn't believe that a woman had been that person they were talking to all along. And so some stuff happened at that show where they tried to kind of pull one over on us and like give us, like, the guy who we advanced with had gotten the wrong gear, and like there was like an issue with a bunch of the stuff that they had rented for us. It wasn't the stuff we'd asked for, which happens a lot. And then they tried to blame it on me, and sort of like they put it back on me, like, because you don't know what you're doing. I think it was just like they were really not feeling me being a woman, especially there's a lot of sexism, I would say. So yeah, it was interesting. And I think that's like definitely an experience that I have often in the industry with all different types of people, with venue people, with festival people, with managers. It can be a thing, not always, but it's definitely a thing as a woman. And I always try to give younger females advice to instead of trying to prove something and prove that you're better because you're a woman, just be better and prove it silently by just showing that just because you're a woman, you can do the job just as well without having to like puff up and give someone an excuse to say that you're a bitch. I don't know if I can say it here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a thing.
That's really good advice. Yeah. Thank you. That was a really great story. I guess another question I have is like, how much do you bring with you when you go on tour? Like, is this like a suitcase thing, or is it,
my personal stuff?
Like, yeah, how much are you, like, how much does that look like for you?
God, my packing stuff is so crazy. You have to take the entire way service. Sorry, everybody. I try. Okay, so it's funny. This is a conversation I've been having a lot lately because packing gives me anxiety, big time. And sorry, can you guys hold on one second?
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry, I'm trying not to lose service in this car.
Yeah, you're all good. No worries.
Packing. Yeah, so packing gives me like bad anxiety. I don't know why. It's funny. People always laugh at me and are like, how's that even possible? Like, what do you mean? Like, you travel all the time? That seems crazy. But the truth is, I think that because I've been traveling for almost 17 years around the world, and I don't have a lot of time at home. I usually travel between 6 and 8 months out of the year. So I spend very little time at home. And so it's like a tease when I'm home. I just really want to stay there. And so a big part of me wants to go, but another part of me doesn't want to leave. So I think I'm in denial up until the point when I'm like actually putting things in my suitcase. And then, a lot of times you're touring, like, especially if you're in America, like you're touring, if we're coming to Minnesota, for example, and it's like, November, we might also be in like LA in November, and sometimes it could be like 85 like it was today in LA, but then we could get to Minnesota and it could be like minus 20. I think it's like I'm always trying to figure out like what am I gonna pack, and I end up usually packing too much stuff. That's usually the thing. When I usually just wear black jeans and black t-shirts and black tennis shoes or black boots because I'm wearing stage clothes. Usually you have to wear black on stage, so it's pretty like basic. But then I'm gonna throw in like these like cool blue jeans and like some like cool shoes or something, just in case we go out on a day off. Nope, that never happens for me. So I think I'm always ambitious that I'm gonna get like a day off outfit going, and so I bring a couple day off outfits and then they just stay folded in my suitcase the entire time. But also as a woman, I have to say, as a woman on the road, I definitely over time have come to realize that like I need my big shampoo and I need my big soap and I need my body lotion and I need like whatever it is that makes me feel comfort. Like, I just want to shower and like do all my like routine when I'm off in my hotel, even if I'm working. I think there's certain things that I just won't sacrifice. I'm just not that person that's gonna like throw a toothbrush in my bag and like use the hotel shampoo. I'm like, I
Yeah.
just want like a few things that make me feel like the comforts of home. And I think over time, bathing is a very rare thing for me on the road.
Yeah.
Sorry, TMI, but it's like how
No.
like if I get a shower in the morning, I'm lucky.
Mm-hmm.
So and hopefully I can get that. I will wash everything like 10 times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's interesting because that's just stuff that you are not gonna like read or learn about in a class. So thank you for that. Um, I guess another thing, what with your job, I mean, obviously your job has obviously changed a ton this year. What are some of the bigger changes and like how have you had to adapt to that?
Um, yeah, it's been really weird not to have work. I think, I know a lot of people. I've just been doing this for a really long time. So everyone I know, every people I know, and I think we're all the first couple months we had like hope that maybe it wouldn't be as bad as we were all thinking it would be, and that things would maybe kind of get back to normal by the fall or maybe even by the late summer. Obviously, we had a lot of stuff booked before this happened, so I think we were all really hopeful that
Mm-hmm.
things would change when we or something. And after, by the time like July rolled around, I think everybody realized that this wasn't going away anytime soon. And um, I think a lot of us are in shock. I think nobody really understands like what this means for us. And I think we're grateful that there's this pandemic help because, in the industry, we don't have unions for music. So there's no union that's going to help us and we're not paying into unemployment. So if this was any other situation, we wouldn't be getting unemployment. People who are
Mm-hmm.
independent contractors don't generally get unemployment benefits. So
Mm-hmm.
I have to say a lot of us are thankful for that. And I think that's the only way that everybody's surviving.
Mm-hmm.
The past 6 months for me have been really a lot of thinking, a lot of like rethinking about if I'll go back to the same job, not just because I want to, but also because I wonder if things will ever be the same in the
Yeah.
industry. I'm not sure, at least for a few years. I think it could be even up to like 5 years before things
Mm-hmm.
get kind of back to normal again. I've definitely been rethinking my job. I've definitely been really enjoying my time off. I had my first summer off this year in like 12 years or something.
Mm-hmm.
So there's another like lazy part of me that's like, am I sure I want to go back out on the road again? Like, I don't know about that. But I think I'm just the other day started really missing traveling and really
Mm-hmm.
missing touring. And, I work with such incredible artists. Like, I feel so lucky to be with the artists that I'm with, and they're all going a little stir crazy too. And when I
Yeah.
think about who I've been able to like go on tour with and the experiences I've had and how appreciated I feel a lot of times when I'm out there,
Mm-hmm.
I miss it a lot. And actually, one of the things that I've been trying to work on something here locally with some friends, and it's been kind of an idea. Like a bunch of vendors came to me, like lighting and audio, and some other friends of mine who do sound and lights and stuff, and they were like, we've all been like kind of stirring in like a group chat about like how we could get something going in LA, and we decided that we want you to produce it and curate an event here, and just like when it's time, you just like get us all involved. So I kind of thought about it for a while. I've been really involved in the justice stuff here and
Mm-hmm.
worked the polls this year and stuff, and involved in local politics, but I didn't have a lot of time to think about it. But lately I've been thinking about it a little bit more now that it's sort of over, that I'm going to do an event. I think I'm hoping that it will work out in the spring. And I think that we need to kind of reimagine what events look like now. And I think that's been a big thought in my mind about like how things will get done anymore. And I think because I live in California, Southern California, it's possible that we could do something, 2 or 3 or 4 times a year because of the weather here. It's like we could do an outdoor thing more than once a year. And I
Mm-hmm.
also just think like people are really desperate to get something going. And my thought is to do sort of like a multimedia event. I think that's really based on community and sort of like getting all my local vendors involved and local crews involved and like staging and engineers and all the people that I know who live close by to me, you know, and musicians that live in Los Angeles, and make it something more than just a like regular festival. I think doing something where it could be outside, we could have multiple stages, we can like stagger the people coming in, and like just see, we can do something that kind of is really centered. For me, what I'd like to do is center something around current events that are happening now, around, you know, things that are happening in the world now. I think it's really important now. We can't just go back to normal and forget the things that have happened in the last 6 months. And I don't just mean politics and justice. I think I mean kind of everything, like reimagining like our life after COVID. And so I think like doing something that involves my community and the people who live close to me and the people that I know local, so we can like give them a spotlight, give venues, you know, have each stage like named after a venue, and so that we can kind of like shine light on the people who are struggling to like keep their stuff going in this crazy time. And I really believe that like in order for things to continue ever again, we have to really focus on our communities here and the people who are involved in locally and the things that we love, especially in the music industry. So yeah, so I'm gonna produce this event here, so maybe some of you guys can come out for it.
Yeah, that's definitely something that like us as college students as well, like I'm like so grateful that like for such the small things now, like living in an apartment with 3 other people and like spending all my time with them. Like a couple of years ago, that never would have been something that I would have been so grateful for, but like having the little interactions and having like community, and I think we're all going to come out of this like a bit more appreciative for like the smaller things. So yeah, for sure. Let's see. So we had some people that asked some questions when they RSVP'd for this. And someone asked if there were any positives. And I know you talked about this a little bit, like any positives coming out from like the changes with COVID and like the impact it's had on your job.
I think a lot more negative from in the industry itself. I think it's been a real negative effect for all of us here. Like I was saying before, I think that people thought that it wouldn't be as long as it has been, and I think it's been a real shock for people. I've been seeing a lot of local venues shutting down. I've been seeing a lot of like, you know, I know booking agencies are trying to figure out how to like how to do something for these bands that want to play shows. I think there's been a lot of it's really scary, I think, especially when I think about like what I was saying before, like, you know, when I had a really stressful day on tour, and no matter what I was feeling, when I got out onto the stage and the show was happening and everything was working, and you can see everyone's face and you see how important it is, music to people and shows. I think when I think about that, it makes me really sad, because I know that, you know, I see these fans out there too who are like, meet the band and they're like, you know, your music has changed my life, like it saved me from a dark time. And I think I think a lot of us, more than people might think, are really concerned about how like the art that sort of saves people in a lot of ways, you know, even if it's just like for decompressing on the weekend. I think getting that out there to people, I think we're all worried about that a little bit too, you know, like how will that affect people's, like, how will we reintegrate that into life? I think, yeah, it's been hard for everyone. Positive things, I mean, I think everyone in the music industry needed a little bit of time off, in my opinion. I also think one of the things that I've talked about a lot with some of my friends is that I think, you know, there's been such an oversaturation of music in the world because of our access to it now, like with streaming and festivals. Like, you know, there's so many festivals in the world right now that you can go to, and it's kind of all the same bands, and there's Spotify and there's, you know, YouTube, and there's so many ways to access music, which is positive. But I also think it created a lot of duplicates of like bands that kind of all just sound the same, or one hit wonders and stuff like that. So in a way, I always keep saying this, but I think that COVID and kind of reimagining what the music world will look like, I think it will kind of weed out some of the stuff that just isn't, that's just a duplicate, you know. And I don't mean that, I'm sorry if I don't want to offend anyone, but I do get the music industry got a little oversaturated in every way, in like this way, in musical way, and I think it will weed out a little bit of that and kind of bring back down to earth what's really important. And the things that will last will be the things that, like, are actually impactful in the industry. So in a way, that's like a really positive thing about this.
Yeah, for sure. Someone else asked how relevant your college major was to your current career, which we learned is botany.
Completely irrelevant.
Yeah. So like in that same vein, any advice you have for college students, like for students that are interested in going into the music industry after college, advices about like majors or anything along those lines would be very much appreciated.
Yeah, I definitely think, like, as a tour manager, production manager, well, as a tour manager, I think like something that I had to learn on the road that I wish I would have known more about is like uh, things like accounting, like
Mhm.
really, like, I taught, I learned just like on the whim because I had to, but I really wish that I didn't even have time once it was going to take classes, but I wish I knew more. I had better accounting skills and
Mhm.
also better skills at like using Excel and
Mhm.
Photoshop and like programs like this. There's also some really cool, if any of you guys are interested in doing music production, there's some really incredible programs, like 3D programs, where you can actually like draw an entire stage with like everything on it, like engineer it in 3D, and then actually see if it's like feasible, like if you're doing a show or if you wanted to put on a festival and like you're trying to figure out how to make it work. That's like one of the things I wish I also had time to learn, is like some like Vectorworks or like other programs like this. I think a lot of the computer stuff was like, I didn't really take any courses on like computer programs or like, Word or Excel or Photoshop or any of these kinds of programs, 3D programs. I think if you're interested in doing live production or tour managing, you definitely should invest in doing some of the Vectorworks programs or other 3D and like accounting stuff. I think that is extremely beneficial even on a resume. But
Mhm.
another thing I would say is learn Spanish. That's
Mhm.
like, I couldn't stress that one enough. I think knowing another, particularly Spanish, because it's just the other most spoken
Yeah.
language, one of the most, it's really beneficial to, if you're trying to be on tour, it will help you so much. And I think
Mhm.
like everyone should learn another language no
Yeah.
matter what. But I think honestly, Spanish, everyone should be speaking Spanish fluently in America. And if
Yeah.
you want to tour, it'll be such a benefit to your career, honestly. Um, and then also, I guess, as far as like being, if you're trying to get into like booking and all that stuff, I think taking business managing classes is really helpful. I think there's a lot of people who wing it or who just get lucky. Like, I definitely think the music industry is about who you know, for
Mhm.
sure. But I think if you have extra skills that are going to make people say like, well, but this person took like, also get you far, for sure, and definitely cannot hurt you at all. But honestly,
Yeah.
Spanish and like computer programs, learning how to do more computer stuff.
Yeah. Well, someone sent in the chat that there's a Vectorworks class here at the U next semester. So,
Take it.
yeah.
Even
Yeah.
if you're not sure, I think the truth is, like, I see a lot of managers and booking, a lot of managers that I work with for bands, they don't know very much about getting into band management. I think one of the things that most managers say to me is like, one of the first things they'll say, "Oh, we're so glad to have you because we just have no idea about production," and it's not really their job.
Yeah.
I honestly think now, and the way that the world is going, and how we'll get back into things, like, we can't have 500 managers in Los
Mhm.
Angeles, managing bands. We need to whittle it down to like, who are the best managers, and
Mhm.
I think the managers who take time to like learn a little bit more about production, or a little bit more about certain things, I think that would benefit, even being a band manager, even a booking
Yeah.
agent. I think those things would really benefit, knowing how to like understanding just enough about production so that when festivals are, maybe try to screw you over, or like there's confusion, I mean, at least you're a manager who can understand a little bit more than the average one. I think that would only like enforce your place in the industry,
Mhm.
for sure. So even if you're uninterested in that, I think it would be beneficial.
Yeah, for sure. Like, how did you get your production experience? Like, was that on those like first couple tours you did?
Uh, no, not at all. I mean, I think when you're on the road, you just learn things because
Mhm.
you have to. Like, there
Mhm.
could be a situation where like you know, all the entire like lighting system goes down and it's just like a panic chaos. And I think to her next things in your life. So if you're interested, I think I was very interested in learning how to do production. At some point, it became something I was more interested in than tour managing. And I got asked to go out on the road with a band called Animal Collective. And the production manager was a guy that I knew. He does a stage at Outside Lands Festival in San Francisco, and he was going to be the production manager. And I got asked to tour manage, but the agreement was that when he left, because he could only do it for a month, I would take over his job as the production manager. And I was like, well, but there's like a semi truck of gear, and I've never like been a production manager before. And I was just like, I don't know how that's going to work out, you know? And of course I know things, like I definitely know things for sure from years and years of just being on stages and you know, asking questions or, you know, watching and just kind of being observant. But I was like, I'm not sure this will work out. And he was just like, Solana, I have confidence that you can do this. And so the deal was that I would go out as the tour manager and learn the stage with him every day, learn how to get the truck unloaded and packed back up again and all the basic stuff. So I did it. I did that with him for a month, and then I went out on the road with it for a few months and production managed it. And you know what? It went pretty well. It went pretty good. And I learned a lot of things. It definitely didn't go perfectly because nothing in tour is ever perfect.
Yeah.
But there's a lot that I learned from that experience. And after that, I felt really much more confident on a stage. Like before, if you asked me to like plug something in, I would have been like, don't make me do it.
Yeah.
But after that experience, I was like, yeah, I can do that. And I think then when I felt confident enough, like we were saying before, to be out on the stage, I started just asking a lot more questions and getting more involved. And then I watched a lot of YouTube videos about certain things that I was interested in. I worked last year, 2019, I worked for Eve Toomer, who's an artist, amazing artist. You should check him out. But he wanted me to work his Ableton. So it would just be me and him, and I would control his Ableton from back behind the stage. And I was like, I don't know anything about Ableton. But I work for Flying Lotus as well. I do his production. And he gave me a bunch of pointers because he uses Ableton for all his music, and gave me like some basic tips and took me to YouTube on how to do certain things. And I think eventually, like, I just learned like some really basic stuff that really helped me do it. And then I just did it. And I was just like, what's the worst that's going to happen is it's not going to turn on.
Yeah.
And someone has to help me. And that's the worst case scenario. But, you know, in a touring world, there's lots of rehearsals. So I had plenty of time to learn things and stuff. And I think, honestly, I think a lot of people get scared of looking like bad and not knowing. And that's a real thing. But also, if you don't ask questions, like, no one's gonna think you're stupid. And if you're on tour with someone who makes you feel bad for asking a question about something you don't know, then they're an idiot, because it's just not the right way, you know. My whole thing about being on tour is like, there's no wrong question, and like everyone should be like learning from each other. You know, you're a family, we're out there together. There's months and months, like a whole year of like sharing time with people. So I think, yeah, being out there and just asking questions or being interested in things is so much that I learned being out on the road from people being patient and letting me watch, or just like teaching me little things on the side when they had time.
Yeah, for sure. Before I keep going, if anyone ever wants to unmute themselves and ask questions, feel free to go ahead. So if anyone wants to do that, just jump on. Don't be shy. But otherwise, I can just keep going. What's the longest period of time that you've been on like one continuous tour? Like, what has been your longest
tour? Oh man, I think like nonstop without a break at all was like almost 3 months of tour. And it was crazy. It was in America, and it was with, I think it was with the Blood Brothers, and it was a co-headlining tour. It was the Blood Brothers. It's a band from Seattle, like a punk band, and another band called Coheed and Cambria. And it was a co-headlining, which means that every other night, one band is the headliner. And we did every single city in America, like every little town, every college, everything. And I think we were just like, it was just a lot of traveling and not a lot of days off. And a lot of times when you're on the road, especially when you're in America and on a tour bus, you don't really get a day off. Like sometimes we'll be like, oh, we have a day off tomorrow, but it's just a driving day on the tour bus. So, the tour bus is usually like 12 people, maybe sometimes it's 6 or 7, but it's usually 12 people. So there's not a lot of space or private space. You're just kind of in your bunk on the bus, like trying to be alone, trying not to do anything. So one tour, I think, it was 3 months, but the longest like period of time I've been out with a band, like not like with a touring cycle, we call them. I think it was with Purity Ring. That was like in 2015, and we did a year and a half basically of tour, which it was crazy. And there was definitely breaks in between. We would go home for like a week, and then or we would like be home for like 3 weeks and then go back out for like 2 months, and then we come home for like 3 days, and then we go back out for, and it was all over the world. It was a whole world. So for me, like when I get home, I don't really get any time off. Like I'm still working, as a tour manager or production manager, you're just like always on your email. So, and you always have to be available for managers and stuff when they need you. I think the amount of things that you're doing on a tour, people just don't even know about. There's so many things. And I think, it's really in my hands, and everyone's kind of like, counting on me to get it going. So I think even when I was off work, I really didn't have a lot of time to relax. And so a year and a half of, even when I'm home, I'm still working. I don't get to like hang out really with anyone. It's like maybe I'm going to try to get dinner and drink with someone and like have a life at all. But usually I'm like in my pajamas till 5 p.m. on my computer, and then I'm like, I got to get out of the house. So it was a long tour. It was like, a year and a half of just like nonstop. And it was a crazy production and a really big tour with not a lot of people. So we were all just really working our butts off for a year and a half too. It was really epic.
Oh my goodness. And if I could only imagine, but it feels like going home for like 3 days is just like giving you this tiny little taste of like being home, and then you've got to go back out. Like,
it's crazy. Being home for 3 days, like the worst case scenario. It definitely, you're like, am I even gonna get the suitcase packed and repacked again? You're like,
why unpack
clothes? Going to Australia in the summer, so I just need to like get rid of these winter jackets, and then at the very last minute, you're like throwing things out, like stuffing them into your closet, just like shutting the door and putting like some shorts in there or something. Not very relaxing.
Sam, if you want to ask your question, go ahead.
Yeah, of course. Hello. I just had a quick question about your experience on tour. Have you been like a part of any like artists like creative moments? I know like artists get super creative on tour and like write songs and just get new ideas. I was just wondering if you had experiences with that.
Oops, I muted myself. I toured with an artist named Nico Jar for a while. He's like a techno artist, and he is really like, I think he doesn't consider himself like just a musician, I think his process is really like, it's like an art installation, so everything about the people that are around him in that experience is part of his experience. So when I toured with him, it was really important to him that all of us, there was only 4 crew members. So it was me and a lighting guy, a sound guy, and a lighting tech. It was extremely important to him that everyone was involved in the project. You know what I mean? And so he really considered us sort of part of the experience. It was really important to him that we were all involved. So I had never experienced that before, because usually it's something that, it happens behind the scenes. And of course, like I'm there to assist, especially if I'm doing production in like the artistic vision, but it's like the vision is there, and then I'm just sort of like making it happen. But with Nico Jar, it was definitely like, we would have a meeting every single day about the next day, and we were all really involved in what was going to happen, every detail of every minute of every second. It was like a very, very involved process, less in song making, but I think in how we would execute the experience for people on like a daily basis, because in the touring world you're constantly tearing down an art installation, so to speak, and reinstalling it, and every single venue is different and every single experience is really different because you can never recreate the exact same thing because you're in a different space every day and the sound is different and the amount of people is going to be different. And so yeah, I think for him, he really looked at it as like an experience that people were having. So it was really, we were all very, very involved in his process of like on a daily basis, which was actually really a cool experience for me. Yeah, it was something really different.
Yeah, and then Katie asked in the chat, what has been the most rewarding part of being a tour manager?
Most rewarding part, honestly, I would say it's been getting to, I mean, I think two things. First one would be getting to travel around the world and see like the entire world. I think there's like nothing that could be better than having a job that lets you travel around the world. Obviously, it's hard to see the whole world, but it is a really incredible experience. It's taught me so many things about other people, you know, and about other communities and other music scenes and stuff like that. But also, I just think like some of the problem solving skills that I've learned on the road, I see them like seep over into my real life. And I think like my patience and like learning how to deal with stress in really like intense situations has really like taught me so much about life in general too. And I do think when I think about what will I do now that the music industry is sort of non-existent, as a tour manager, especially a production manager, I think there are so many things that I've learned on the road with my just like problem solving things that could easily bleed over into like many different kinds of jobs. I don't have to just be a tour manager. I could work in film, I could work in fashion. Like there's so many things where my skill set just from being able to problem solve and like plan things and like kind of planning an entire tour is such a crazy thing. But I think because of those skills, I could easily like move into like a different industry pretty seamlessly, I think. Even like a corporate job, like I think I could easily apply at Apple or Spotify, maybe not right now, but you know, in the world, normal world, I think
Yeah.
my skill set, just like the problem solving and sort of like being on top of things and like being able to just like get things done, which is something that you just kind of learn when you're on the road, just from life, like the experience of being out there, that would bleed over real easily into other jobs. In fact, it did for me. I ended up getting hired at a museum here in Los Angeles called the Bro Museum. I just met the director of events at a sushi restaurant, like totally randomly, and we started talking about what we did. And I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm a production manager," and he was like, "Oh, we need someone like you at the Broad. Like we're starting to do our events, and we don't have anyone who knows how to like, you know, rent staging and put a crew together and stuff." So I ended up working with them the first 2 summers, doing all their summer events, which were like multimedia events. And then eventually I was on tour, so I couldn't do them anymore. But I ended up hiring the crew and kind of just like putting other people like my people in there so that they could continue the work I was doing. So it definitely was like I remember when they were hiring me, I was like, you know, I don't really know anything about art. Like I have no, and I was like, no, and he was like, doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
He was like, not really, you know. But I was like, okay, cool. I never would have thought that I could like work in a fancy art museum, you know. But I realized I think then that your job skills as a tour manager, especially, and just the experience of traveling around the world and stuff, problem solving, it really transfers into lots of different things, lots of different industries.
Yeah. Another question that I have is, what has been like what some of your top like countries or cities that you've gotten to see while on tour?
I just had this conversation with someone else, but oh man, there are so many incredible places. But I think it's some of my favorite places to play shows and like just have had the opportunity to stay and be there too is Istanbul. I really love Istanbul. It's one of my favorite cities, and some of the experience I've had with bands there have been incredible, just so amazing. But also touring in South America is really great as well. Like Peru is such an amazing country, and Lima is just such a cool city. Colombia is great. The people there, some of the booking agents there have become friends, and they're incredible. They're so passionate about what they do. I love Colombia. All the big cities in Colombia are so amazing. Japan is one of my favorite places to go. I think Japan definitely like takes the cake as far as like my top places to go. If I was just picking other places, I love Greece. Greece is like one of the most beautiful places in the world. I lived in Europe for 12 years actually, because being a tour manager, you can kind of live anywhere as long as you're available when you need to be available. You're at home. So after I left Seattle, I went to New York for a few years, and then I moved to Europe, and I lived there for 12 years. So I got to travel a lot there. And, you know, of course, all the major places that we all love, like Italy, amazing. But I think Istanbul and Japan are like two of my places. Iceland also.
Yeah, for sure. Well, if anyone else has any more questions, feel free to jump in. Yeah, unmute yourself. You're all good.
Yeah, I just had another question. Have you personally seen like any unexpected trends in the music industry? Like now, like a lot of people are saying that there's lots of ambiguity in the music scene, but do you see any like people thriving or like parts of the industry growing that are kind of unexpected? Because I know I've like done some research on like the hyperpop community and like the remote nature of like their music production, things like that. Do you have anything that you've noticed?
I do. I think actually, I've been getting a lot of feedback from some of my like more minimal artists, like some of the DJs or like people who don't have like a band. That actually they've been feeling a lot more creative. I think they feel a little more free, like being able to like create outside of the box of touring. And I think that actually, obviously, like what's it called, like Twitch and all the things, people that are doing concerts online. I think it's definitely a withdrawal from not having the crowd there, but I do think it's creating a whole other community of people who are able to like do something, like to really produce something online and make it important, you know, and figure out a way to do it and create something new that actually works and feels like interactive for sure. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
If anyone else wants to jump in, feel free to go ahead. Do you ever, like, obviously prior to coronavirus, did you ever like have time to go to like just concerts and like do that on your own, or do you always just like?
Oh man, sometimes I really like, it was hard for me to like want to leave my house, to be honest, when I was home. But if it was friends, I would always go. It's funny being in the industry. I love going to see shows. It's something I want to do, but I never really want to hang out backstage. And it's not really like I'm nervous. Like it's fine, but I think I'm just like, I don't want to be in people's spaces. Like I just know how annoying it is when I'm working, and as much as I love my friends and I want to see them, I'm like, just don't come backstage. Like I'm too busy, I don't have time, you know. So yeah, going out to shows and stuff, I'll go if it's friends or if it's something I really want to see. I end up going to a lot of like smaller shows. I think I'm really interested in like what's happening in the music industry outside of the mainstream, and like I was saying before, I think the scene has become really oversaturated, and the idea of like a headliner, I think that may be something that we need to get rid of, just because I think there are so many incredible bands, and I think it just it's not really relevant anymore. Like I think so many people are making music. I think when I'm at home, I try to go out and see things that are happening that, sorry.
No, you're good.
You went, but I'm just trying to like see how to be involved in the music industry, but not have to be going to see huge shows all the time. So I've been really lucky. I live next to a venue called Zebulon in Los Angeles, and there's a lot of like local shows. They do a lot of like jazz stuff, and they also do like a lot of small bands, like weird stuff that you wouldn't like. No, I would never have like known about it unless they were doing stuff like that. So I've been fortunate enough to be able to walk to that venue, which is like 5-minute walk from my house, and see things that like just turn up just for no reason and see something really cool and interesting. And I think that there's so many local artists in LA. And as I plan this event, something I really want to focus on is like artists that are here in this community that don't really get seen, because I think there's so many people, like so many festivals, and there's so many mainstream artists that like a lot of the smaller artists aren't really getting focused. And it's one thing that I think will change now. And then I'd like to be part of making that change for sure.
Definitely.
So seeing shows, yeah, I do it, but I'm more interested in seeing new things that might surprise me.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we've only got a couple minutes left, so if anyone else has questions, feel free to just jump in. No worries.
I don't want to steal anyone's time. If anyone else has questions,
I love it. Keep talking.
I just like talking about this stuff. Like, do you have any advice on getting involved in the music scene now that, like, you know, I just feel like shows were just such a big part of like meeting people and just like being a part of the scene now? Like, how would you suggest getting involved? Because I'm an artist myself. I'm trying to like find new people to work with and things like that.
Yeah.
Very curious.
Wow, I don't even know, honestly. It's something I've been asking as well. I guess I feel like, how are people making connections in the music world? One of the things that I've noticed is some of the people that I know who are kind of constantly in the studio producing stuff. Like, so a lot of the, like I was saying before, some of the more minimal artists or some of the bands I know who are like quite close, or people, maybe they're roommates and they played music together as well. So COVID safe. Have just been making music, and I think I've seen a lot of collaborations happening, like via digital collaborations. All the like a lot of the Brainfeeder artists, which is Flying Lotus and Thundercats record label, they've been doing a thing every Thursday. So they do like a live show every Thursday, and they have guests coming on, and they're collaborating. So it's not just like, oh, we're doing a bunch of different people. They're actually like collaborating and making music together as well, you know, at the same time. So I think what could be a really cool idea, and we've talked about this as well in my circle of music people, is if more people around the world started like collaborating and figuring out a way to collaborate. Because obviously now that we're in a digital music age, we can share files and you can pass things back and forth. And a lot of musicians, you know, someone might be in Germany and can't fly out to LA even pre-COVID, and they're just share music and collaborate on something and then, you know, put it out. I think that'd be really cool if people started like, you know, the book club of music where you were like trading different ideas back and forth. Then you could like actually create a project and like stream it live. And I think now in this era, like people should be creating their own little festivals. I think if you're interested, you should check out the Brainfeeder things. I think it's every Thursday night they do something on Twitch. I think like Flying Lotus started doing it, and then he just brings in all kinds of different artists. But it's really interesting what they're doing, and I think other people are doing it as well. I know a lot of venues are trying to stream at the venue and then bring in different artists, but I think it would be really cool to create like little book clubs of people who are making music. So it's not just about your music, but it's about collaborating with other artists and sort of putting together like a little mini, you know, streaming festival. As kind of boring as that sounds at this stage of COVID, but you know, I think it'd be cool to collaborate with other people. It'd be a good way, I think, would be to start sharing with people and just like opening up like a little book club of like beats or, you know, music or whatever you're interested in. I think that's like the future of it, really. I don't know how else people are gonna continue without, you know, trying to do something online.
Yeah. And I guess just one last question from the chat. What kind of person do you see succeed in the music industry? What makes it work for people?
I've been asked this before. I think the one thing that's going to take you the furthest is being level-headed. I think like learning how to deal with like high stress situations, listening to people, having an open mind to like any situation that arises. I think the people that I see succeed the most are the people who really want to learn and who aren't afraid to ask questions and like be involved in something that's not necessarily their job. I think a lot of people go into it thinking like, I'm the sound guy and I only touch the soundboard. But the people who really go far in the music world, even managers, even band members, even like crew members or booking agents, are people who are willing to take on something that's not necessarily their own thing and to be level-headed and to not be stressed out all the time. I think a lot of people get angry because it's hard being out there, you know, but I think a lot of people, the way they deal with it, it really rubs off on people. And I think the reason why people get really good jobs is because they're known as being like the person that you want to work with in the industry.
Yeah.
I think they're willing, someone who's willing to, do something that's not their job. I think that's like in the touring world, like especially I think just like taking on things that aren't your own or being willing to learn and open to things that might change. I think that's like what makes people really successful in the industry for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I know that I really appreciate, and I'm sure other people do as well. Before anyone hops off the call, if you wouldn't mind filling out this little recap thing just about how you found this event and with your like UMN email account, that would be awesome. But thank you so much, Solana, for talking to us.
Thanks, everybody.
Really appreciate it.
Care. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Thank you.